Hi, I'm Gene, and welcome to AssessMinutes, where we take a complex assessment topic and break it down to make it easily understandable, because minutes matter. This is the first part of a two-part video series on alignment. We will begin by talking about different types of alignment, and then we'll progress on and talk about learning progressions, which represent Renaissance's very unique approach to aligning our assessments to your standards. But first of all, let's begin with types of alignment. And the first thing we need to acknowledge is Renaissance follows a very specific alignment strategy or alignment process. And this is not a process that we developed by ourselves. We actually consulted with some of the leading think tanks in the country around standards, alignment, and assessment. Of particular note, the Mid-Continent Research Educational Laboratory and Education Northwest. Again, these people are leaders in the field about standards and what it means to be aligned, and so we developed our process with them. So let's talk about the different types of alignment, because when teachers think about types of alignment, they tend to really only think about one type of alignment. They think about direct alignment. And in a case of a direct alignment, which is basically like two circles coming together perfectly, the standard in the standards documents from the state directly lines up with a very specific skill in the assessment or the product from the vendor. The words may vary slightly, but basically, when the state asks for this, it lines up exactly with what's in the product or assessment. The two fit completely and wholly together. That is a direct alignment. However, what Education Northwest and the Mid-Continent Research Educational Laboratory helped us to also understand is there are additional types of alignment that also need to be considered when you're trying to develop or trying to determine how well a given product or assessment is aligned with your standards. For example, we could have a partial alignment where part of the circles fit together, but it's not the perfect overlap completely, as in the case of direct. So for example, let's use math standards because they illustrate this quite clearly. Often in math standards, there will be a given skill or an operation that a student is to perform, and it might say, perform the skill with numbers up to 20 or 50 or 100 or something like that. Or it might say, take a variety of numbers, and the standard could say, compare them using greater than, less than, and equal, and reorder them, move them around if you've been given them in a certain order. And so let's use that one as an example. Compare them and arrange them in order. Greater than, less than, equal to. In the case of a STAR assessment, we could very easily create items for kids to compare things. But it's a much harder thing to use the technology to create something that kids could touch and reorder. So in that case, we would have a partial alignment. The standard said, compare them and order them. And we can create items where they can compare them, but creating items for them to be ordered, that's quite different. Another example would be in math standards. Sometimes it'll talk about skills and it will say students will use manipulatives to do something. And again, that would be a very difficult thing to do in a standardized test. So there could be a portion of it that we could simulate on the test, but it wouldn't capture the whole thing. So it's somewhat like a direct alignment, but you'll notice only part of the circle gets covered. The final type of alignment would be supportive alignments. And one easy way to think about that is related prerequisites. The standard asks you to do a given skill. There's a skill in the assessment that's one of the prerequisites, so it's somewhat supportive, illustrated by this small circle feeding into a larger circle, or perhaps the standards phrase it one way. Something else can be done in the assessment or in the product. There's a partial overlap there, but it's still much more significantly smaller than with the partial alignment here, but it still does qualify. And again, this is part of the process that we work through with those think tanks and those advisors to say, yep, the perfect thing that you really want is direct alignment, but you know what? A lot of partial alignments and supportive alignments, those need to be considered as well, because even if it's only partial, it is still covering a significant portion of what the standards expect. So these are the types of alignment that we'll talk about: direct, partial, and supportive. And each one of those can contribute to an assessment or a product being an effective tool to measure how well your students are doing on the standards. Stay tuned for our next section, where we'll talk about Renaissance's unique approach, which is the development of learning progressions for each state or country that we work with.